Go ahead and announce this story, Will. I'm going to have one last chip, all right?
Apple's $600 M2 Mac Mini obliterates the $6,000 Mac Pro. That's crazy. We should test it out.
Listen, this happens all the time. The Mac Pro is such a terrible ROI. And we get reminded of it every single time a new consumer product comes out with Apple's latest stuff in it before a refresh happens to the Pro level thing, which happens far less frequently, as we're aware. And it's the cost of entry, the price of entry on the Mac Pro is so much higher to begin with that people start making these comparisons because guess what? It's still being sold in its previous configuration at the moment for whatever 10x on this other stuff. Mm-hmm. And people sit there and look at it and go, this is absurd because they're checking all these benchmarks and realizing that in most circumstances, the consumer stuff is actually outdoing the pro stuff. Now, obviously, there's use cases where that's not the case. But for, these comparisons start to come out and they go, listen, what you really want for many, many people is to upgrade the consumer stuff. Or, Apple still calls it Pro in some cases. This obviously takes it a step further and goes all the way to the Mac Mini. Mm-hmm. But I consider that consumer stuff because it's refreshed more frequently. You're better off just moving through those products at a more consistent pace in most cases, as opposed to getting into the Mac Pro universe and then watching your investment tumble to zero.
And there's also the Mac Studio, too.
Mac Studio is the in-between. Mm-hmm. I know they're going to do a new Mac Pro, but it's never going to be on that refresh cycle where it's constantly experiencing the latest in Mac components. Now, as soon as the refresh happens, that new Mac Pro is going to be blazing, obviously, and everyone's going to go, okay, let me pull out my credit card. Mm-hmm. But at the moment, here we have a comparison to a $600 Mac Mini, even more proof. M2 Mac Mini tested using in single-core and multi-core operations compared to the Intel-based Mac Pro. Unsurprisingly, the news is all bad for the expensive 2019 workstation. Two very telling benchmarks. The Mac Mini would still lose against the Mac Pro in different tests. However, in the Geekbench 5 test, very CPU-centric test, the Mac Mini scored 1944 in single-core and 8790 in multi-core versus the Intel Mac Pro, which only managed to hit 1,019 and 8,037 respectively. It is a huge blow to the 2019. The people will use these things, these Mac Pros, and this is no joke, until they're basically worthless. The current trade-in value on these things in the hundreds of dollars, even though the initial cost in close to 10,000, depending on configuration. Mm-hmm. So again, I don't know what people do with their lives and their line of work, but I think in 2023, the vast majority of individuals are probably going to do better off long-term through some sort of upgrade cycle of the less expensive, better kind of cost to performance ratio products as opposed to the pro level.